It's been a minute since our last assessment video about everything going on in Ukraine. You can blame the war in Iran for that, but I need to break down not only what has happened today, but also how the battlefield looks. Because you may have been seeing that there's been a lot of posts talking about how Ukraine has been gaining a lot of land, more land gained by Ukrainians than Russians. And so I wanted to go back and show you 30 days, 60 days, and show you where those gains are, because now that we're hitting spring, the Russians are starting off their offensive, and they're not doing well, losing over 1,500 on average a day, at least for the past 3 days. And so let's go ahead and break things down. Before we do make sure you are subscribed, you turn on notifications, and you give this video a thumbs up. And let's go ahead and dive right in. First, let's break down the news from today, because realistically, there's a lot of news that is going on inside of Ukraine. Starting off with the fact that Ukrainians today destroyed an attack helicopter, a Russian attack helicopter in the Donetsk region. And they didn't do it by a manpad or a portable air defense system. Instead, they used a drone. And the beauty of Ukrainians is that because there's so many drones on the battlefield, we have multiple angles of this happening. One from the drone hitting the helicopter, another one from far away, another one going over it later, showcasing the helicopter completely destroyed. This just shows you a few different things. Russia is trying to move as fast as possible, and in doing so, they're kind of going over that drone zone, which is about 10 kilometers, sometimes more, sometimes less, right at the front line, and where Russian drones and Ukrainian drones are going back and forth. This gray area is a dead zone, meaning that if you're on or in that area walking through, a drone from the opposite side will more than likely find you. And so Russia, in an attempt to try to move forward, they're moving their helicopters closer and closer to the front lines to try to give coverage for the men on the ground. The Russian offensive, by the way, is happening all across the front lines. It's not like it's in one little sector. This just so happened to happen in Donetsk. And in doing so, one helicopter was destroyed. Another helicopter, which was pictured in there, wasn't hit. I'm sure Ukraine probably didn't have another one to spare, at least at that very moment. You know, it's one of those things where these Ukrainian drones are flying around constantly. And it just so happens that Russia showed up with these two helicopters. And so Ukrainians thought, well, let me go ahead and just strike it. And they did. And they filmed it and put it online. But that wasn't the only aircraft that was damaged in the past 24 hours. Ukrainians did a long strike into Russia, into Novograd, where there was an airline facility. This facility repairs what Russia has very few of, A-50s. These are kind of like Russia's spy planes, being able to peer inside. And well, over the past few years, Ukrainians have been able to destroy or damage a decent amount of these. This A-50, from what we're reading, was at that facility to be modernized. You know, because Russia lost a decent amount of them, Russia is pulling from their arsenal what they have in the past and are trying to update them. So this one may have been getting updated and ready to go, and now it is damaged. I don't think people understand how important it is that these are now out of commission. Because I think at this very moment, if I remember correctly, I think Russia only had about 4 of these kind of ready to go. To give you a comparison, when the war began, Russia had anywhere between 8 to 10. So to say that they have 4 operational right now, and one of those was just damaged, that's a pretty big deal. And so Ukraine doing these things, these attacks deep inside of Russia, is actually messing up the Russian psyche. To the point to where actually today we're finding out, just a few hours ago, that Russia fired upon a civilian aircraft, sort of like a fixed wing aircraft in the Moscow region, because Ukrainians in the past, in order to strike very deep, would get like these small aircraft, sort of like banner plane aircraft, like real, like just bones aircraft, a little Cessna kind of thing. And they would put some kind of tracking in it, some kind of autopilot, and then load it up with munitions and fly it into Russia. They would make it seem like a civilian aircraft, and so the Russians wouldn't think about it. And so we're finding out, thanks to the Russian media, that there was a light engine, single engine civilian aircraft that was flying. The Russians took it as a Ukrainian UAV, and they shot it down. There were 2 people on board. They were taken out. So as you could see that Ukrainians are messing up with the Russian psyche, and it is now becoming a psychological warfare, because now Russia is just assuming that anything that is in the skies is Ukrainian, and it's going to attack them in certain areas. But I mean, that one's totally Russia's fault there. And speaking about Russia's fault, we have a very interesting situation. This kind of ties in with Iran and Ukraine and the United States. Obviously, you know that it was announced probably about 2 weeks ago now, since the war is going on, day 20, that Russia was providing Iran with intelligence reports. These intelligence reports are from everything from what's on the ground to actual images from the Russian satellites to target U.S. bases in other countries. Russia had denied this claim every step of the way, to the point to where the U.S. envoy for peace negotiations, Steve Witkoff, who had been meeting with Russian officials, Kirill Dmitriev, and a couple other people, had a phone call with Kirill and said, "Are you guys doing this?" They said no.
Well, I'm not an intel officer, so I can't tell you. I can tell you that yesterday on the call with the president, the Russians said that they have not been sharing. That's what they said. So, you know, we can take them at their word.
Well, according to a new article put up by Politico, that's not true. It turns out that more than likely on that phone call, Kirill probably did state that, yeah, we're not doing that at all. But when Kirill came over to the United States, this was about a week and a half ago, he supposedly told Witkoff and Jared Kushner, let's make a deal. How about we will go ahead and stop giving Iran all this intel about your bases, your ships, and all these things if you guys stop giving intel to Ukraine. But wait a minute, Russia, I thought you guys said that you weren't doing that. Which now is becoming like a back and forth thing, where the Russian envoy is stating that no, we didn't do that. That's not a thing. That's not true. Kirill actually took to his own Twitter, which is funny because I have to look him up a different way. Remember, this is the Kremlin representative that has blocked me. So he is the CEO of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, the guy in which every time Witkoff goes out there, they look at factories and all that. And so he put a few things online. First saying fake to the Political report, then put up a post of a tidal wave slamming into buildings saying panicked UK and the EU warmongers are spreading fake news to deflect from attention, as they know the energy tsunami is coming and will expose their catastrophic strategic blunders and ability to acknowledge or correct them. No brains, no gas. Which, okay, this is the Kremlin doing their own propaganda. But we're going to start seeing consequences from this. Because is it that Witkoff was lied to and then told Trump they weren't doing this? Or was it from the get-go, Russia was straight up telling the United States we were doing it and then Witkoff lied? We're trying to figure out whether or not the Russians lied or Witkoff lied. Nonetheless, I still don't think that Witkoff should be in any parts of these peace talks, since a real estate developer shouldn't be doing political geopolitics at all. You know, so far we've not seen Witkoff go ahead and actually come up with anything concrete. We do know that Ukrainian officials, right now actually, are getting ready to fly out to the United States. According to Zelensky, there's a few things that are going on. For starters, I think it's a $50 billion drone deal that Ukraine had offered the United States a few months ago. When it comes to taking down drones and things like that, Ukrainians already were in the forefront of that. They were trying to sell them to the United States before this war actually broke through. And that deal, as Zelensky says, is still kind of on the table. And so Ukrainians are coming over to the United States. On Saturday, there's going to be a meeting in Miami. They're going to talk about that deal. And Zelensky says, we're ready to kind of sign this if the United States is. But they're also going to be bringing up one very important thing. And that is the fact that the United States does not really have any game plan put together when it comes to security guarantees yet to monitor any kind of ceasefire. And that's very important if you want a ceasefire within the next X amount of days. Remember, Trump wanted a ceasefire, I think, before June. If you actually want a ceasefire, there needs to be guidelines and things put in place now so that they're able to, when it finally happens, throw them into place. Because even if a peace happens today, it's going to take quite some time to either get troops there or move equipment or men. And now that another war is going on, there's some resources not there anymore, especially Tomahawk missiles, something that was originally on the Ukrainian wish list when it comes to security guarantees, something that the United States is starting to run low on, supposedly. I know it's unclear because the U.S. government's never going to give us real information about that. But there are other things that Ukraine could be helping the United States with that could potentially lead to some kind of back and forth. You may know that 6 superpowers, including the UK, Germany, Japan, etc., the Netherlands, you name it, Italy, they kind of wrote a very strong letter together just yesterday announcing that, hey, Iran, stop attacking oil, allow the ships through, and if you're not willing to do that, we're going to have to do something. And this is very important. There was a reporter from Australia that brought up the idea of, how about this? These countries inside of Europe helps the United States out to open the Strait of Hormuz, and in return, the United States will give Ukraine what they need in order to get a just peace.
Now, why doesn't Europe go to Trump and say, if you want assistance in the Gulf, here's what we want you to do on Ukraine?
I think it's a really good idea. I might pick you up on that. No, I think it's actually a really good idea. So,
I'm available for advice.
Can my team take your phone number, please? No, but I mean, yeah. I'll think about it. I'll talk about it with my colleagues.
Referring to the fact that right now, we kind of had Russia where they were. Russia is not able to recruit the amount of losses they're having on the front lines. Ukrainians have taken back more land than Russia has gotten. Something we'll go over in a little bit. And on top of that, the sanctions on Russia was really starting to get to them. Of course, then the United States had to release some of that because of their war in Iran, something that they wouldn't have had to do if they actually communicated with Europe first and had some kind of game plan. That aside, this is a plan that would have been able to, I guess, make a deal with the United States so that Ukraine gets what they need, the Strait of Hormuz opens, gas prices goes down, then you can put the sanctions back on that Russian ships, etc. And so I'm sure that the conversations that are going to be taking place next or this weekend inside of Miami are going to circle around those things. And the fact that Ukrainians have now sent over 228 drone experts to the Middle East to help out. Now, I know that Trump hasn't really said that Ukraine is helping out. Pete Hegseth, actually, interestingly enough, in just an interview, his press conference yesterday, essentially said, Europe should be saying thank you and all that. I thought that was funny because it's like, oh, so it's no longer Ukraine who's not thankful for the United States.
The world, the Middle East, our ungrateful allies in Europe, even segments of our own press should be saying one thing to President Trump. Thank you.
And so we're now getting a situation to where those Ukrainian drone experts are inside the Middle East and are kind of appalled to see what exactly the United States had been doing in order to take these drones down. In the Times, there was a really interesting interview. I actually suggest that you read the article on it. But in it, essentially, these Ukrainian soldiers are saying, we can't believe how the United States had been taking down these drones. Because remember, these are very inexpensive Shahed or Shahed drones, depending on how you pronounce them, that had been used, that Iran is using. They got thousands of them on U.S. bases and other things. And so when these Ukrainian experts went out to the Middle East, they were shocked. According to the article by the Times, it says here, Ukrainian experts stationed in the Middle East were shocked by the United States tactics in shooting down Iranian drones. With one of the officers, who's unnamed, who says, and this is a rough translation of it, I don't understand what they were doing, where they were looking for the past 4 years while we were at war. Saying the fact that we've been at war with Russia, dealing with these drones for the past 4 years. Remember, the United States did get one of these drones from Ukraine to study and reuse and repurpose, and they're using those in Iran right now to strike Iran. But what Ukrainians are saying, yo guys, We've been warning you about these things for the past 4 years, and you didn't learn anything about it. Because while Iran's using these couple $1,000 drones, the United States is spending hundreds of thousands trying to take them down, while Ukrainians develop their own 3D models, the Stingers and things like that, to be able to intercept these things fairly cheaply. The United States, on the other hand, they're using Patriots and other interceptors, which makes Ukrainians go, what? You guys are using the heavy-duty stuff on these tiny little things. And so I really truly wish that Donald Trump is looking and understanding what exactly is happening here so that they're able to look at the situation and say, well, Ukrainians are the ones who has the experience. They're the ones we should have with us on the battlefield to help out. And I really hope that Donald Trump understands that Ukrainians in this scenario are the ones who have more experience, more knowledge, more all of this. And we need to respect what they're doing and learn what they're doing and teach our soldiers what the Ukrainians are doing. And in return, Ukraine should get something. So between that and the 6 powers that are coming to be, other countries, we're hoping things are bowing well for Ukraine. Now, there had been some announcements that came through just a couple hours ago. First and foremost, France, they intercepted another Russian Shadow Fleet vessel. Every time that happens, that's less money going to the Kremlin. But the issue is, unfortunately, I think it's the Kremlin's made a couple $1 billion due to the war in Iran. Because there are no other countries being able to buy that oil. What was it? 1/5 of the world's oil comes through there. So, unfortunately, according to the latest information coming out, if this war continues the next few months, Russia could be making $250 billion, which pretty much gives back a decent amount of money that they have been losing for the past 4 years. All because the United States didn't plan with their allies on this war. Do you see how different wars affect things? That money is now going to Russia. Russia's going to buy more weapons, and it's going to make the war go longer. Kind of the exact opposite of what Trump was screaming at Europe about 6 months ago, as Europe was still buying Russian fuel. And yet the United States then turned around and did exactly the same thing. And another announcement that just came out from the U.S. Treasury stating that the U.S. has banned the supply of Russian oil and petroleum products to Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and occupied territories of Ukraine. And this is interesting here. First, let's go over the Cuban side. The reason why that's interesting is because the Russians were debating whether or not they were going to start using Russian naval vessels to guide these shadow ships around. Because we're seeing countries like today, you saw France did it. And the fact that, Russia has sent an oil tanker to Cuba. And will that be escorted by a Russian ship? The United States already said, we're not going to allow that ship to come through. So what does that mean? Does that mean Russia is going to send a vessel alongside that? And would the United States strike said vessel? It is getting very interesting. Keep in mind that the United States had already allowed Russia to sell a lot of their oil that was kind of already on the boats. According to the U.S. Secretary of the Secretary, he said that we're only selling the stuff that's on the boats now, and Russia, they actually don't make money on that. I disagree. They still make money on that. May not be as much, but still, that is still becoming a thing. And so, will the United States take a shot at this? Are they going to try to sink this thing? I don't think so. I think the United States would just allow it to come through. Keep in mind that the U.S. is not invading Cuba, at least at this very moment, according to U.S. generals. But we are doing some bad damage to them. Their power grid is practically gone. Remember that they only produce about 40% of the oil they need for the island. So there's gas stations out of gas, there's things running out. And without oil and things, a country is going to fold under the U.S. pressure, which more than likely will result in some kind of change of leadership. We still don't know what that is. But remember, all of these little things here are all affecting things going on inside of Ukraine. Now, for the United States to say that Russia can't bring oil to the occupied territories makes me wonder how Russia is able to do that. How does that work? But it also makes those oil tankers more targets. because they can now take those oil tankers out like France is doing. Also, if it's being transported on the ground, that's even more reason to be able to strike these things, which makes me say, well, Ukraine can now strike more oil facilities and the United States would be okay with it because that oil was being transferred to X, Y, and Z. But we'll see what happens there. And now we're going to dive into the deep state maps and show you, because a lot of people have questions about like, how is Ukrainians able to take back so much land? And realistically speaking, right now, the Russians are really trying to push hard in Zaporizhia and some areas in Donetsk. But as the Russians are trying to push, Ukrainians are gaining some land. So we're going to look mostly in this area for just a moment here, show how things looked 1 week ago and how things look today. 1 week ago and today. You'll notice that this land right here, Russia had, they lost. Down here, Ukrainians lost some land, and same thing kind of up here. But let's go ahead and jump back a month. So this is March 19th. Let's go back to February. You could see all this land that Russia had. We'll go back even further. Let's go to the 5th. They even had more land. Go back even further. Well, this part was over here. But Russia stopped here, and Ukrainians were able to gain all this back. All the way to here. That's a lot of land the Russians lost. Now, at the front lines, I have to remind everyone that even though Ukrainians are getting a lot of land, the Russians are still advancing across many different sectors. It's not a lot. As I said before, Ukrainians have been able to get more land back than Russia's been taking, but you go back 30 days, over 30 days, the front line's still moving. So, we talk about who's winning, who's losing. The Russians are still on the front lines pushing forward. Now it's the spring offensive. But as many people have pointed out before, if the Ukrainians were able to survive the winter, they'd be able to really start pushing back on the Russians. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing pretty much an exchange of land. How will that bode moving forward? We don't know. Aid that was going to be supplied to Ukraine, that 90 billion euro, still being paused because of Viktor Orban and Hungary and Slovakia. And so until there's an election inside of Hungary, which, we're about a month away, I don't see that aid being released anytime soon unless the EU is able to make some kind of deal with Viktor Orban, who right now is very far behind in the polls. It doesn't look like he's going to win. I don't know. It's weird on how I keep saying that there's definitely foreign interference happening here because Trump 3 times on Truth Social is trying to push Viktor Orban, which doesn't make any sense to me since majority of Hungarians don't like Trump. So it doesn't make any sense to me. And at the same time, J.D. Vance is flying out to Hungary to try to push Viktor Orban. I mean, that has to be international interference, right? Right? Anyway, that aside, that's your update. There's a lot more other news stories that are happening right now. It's just, there's a lot of things that are weaved in and out. Hopefully I was able to break down a lot of this for you. I will email this out, a part of my Substack newsletter. If you want to sign up for it, it is free. I have a written newsletter that I try to do every night. Thank you to a lot of my friends who actually helped me to get that put together because it does take a lot of resources to do that. We also have a fundraiser going on right now with United 24. Russia last year sent over 61,000 drones into Ukraine. It's like 140 something per day, which is kind of nuts to think about. And so we've teamed up with them to essentially fundraise to buy interceptors and jamming equipment so that civilians can be safe and protected. So if you want to sign up for that, you could donate, anything from $5 and upwards. I'll greatly appreciate it. I'll put my link for that down in the description. And I want to thank all those paid subscribers. On Substack, there's a paid version if you like my independent journalism, what we do here on YouTube or the Substack newsletter or on TikTok. You could sign up for a couple bucks a month. You help me out. I said before, I'm an independent journalist, so I do this in my own time. But I want to thank those people who are going to be mentioned at the end of the video in the credits. But if you guys haven't done so yet, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and give this video a thumbs up. I'm Joey. Stay safe.